Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Morris, and today I want to discuss the misery and survival in Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. Soyeon Wo is the most important character, but because she died prior to the story's timeline, she did not get to share her story for herself. If she was here today, she would likely despise technology, but if she decided to tweet out from the afterlife, she would likely say, at Game Night Mom, I'm the only one not in the story, but it all started with me. Hashtag Mahjong, hashtag they never knew, hashtag we all have hard times. Social media platforms were inaccessible in the 1900s. The news of war was shared through newspapers and gossip. Anyone who was affected by the war could not really see what was going on, but those surrounded by the war held on to all the hope and luck they could. During the Chinese War, the people would eat oranges for good luck and dumplings for good fortune. Tan utilized these values to demonstrate the hardships and the desperate need for hope during the story of Soyeon Wo. Her gatherings of her Joy Luck Club were her way of finding hope, and they would not have gotten through without their beliefs in the fortunes they could get from their parties. The sweet oranges were used to bring happiness into the conversation, and a variety of dumplings could be manipulated to bring fortune of different kinds. At face value, it would seem that Amy Tan is shouting that life is fair because life is unfair to all. Through her multitude of stories about the hardships of life, but when she looked closer to her perspective, we can recognize her optimistic qualities. In the Joy Luck Club, Tan uses gruesome imagery, emotionally impactful diction, and multiple perspectives to assert that happiness does not just happen, but we have to choose to be happy in order to acquire it. Tan is a greatly known born author in San Francisco, but early in her life, her brother and father passed away from a brain tumor. As a result, she bounced around Europe and settled in Switzerland. She didn't visit China until 1987, and when she returned, she received 3 offers to publish a book of short stories, resulting in the Joy Luck Club. Her multicultural experience allows Tan to incorporate complex perspectives through the eyes and characters of a multitude of backgrounds. Tan never wished to be a fictional writer. She went to 5 different colleges and came out with a great career working in language development, helping multicultural children with development disabilities, and later moved into freelance writing for businesses. She only picked up fictional writing as a stress reliever from her heavy freelance workload, but ended up having a talent for the writing style. It's not that we had no heart or eyes for pain. We were all afraid. All had our miseries. But to despair was to wish back something already lost, or to prolong what was already unbearable. How much can you wish for a warm coat that hangs in the closet of a house that burned down with your mother and father inside of it? How long can you see in your mind arms and legs hanging from telephone wires, and starving dogs running down the streets with half-chewed hands hanging dangling from their jaws? What was worse, we asked amongst ourselves, to sit and wait for our own deaths with proper somber faces, or to choose our happiness? So we decided to hold parties and pretend each week had become the new year. Each week, we could forget what past wrongs done to us. We weren't allowed to think a bad thought. We feasted, we laughed, we played games, lost and won. We told the best stories. And each week, we could hope to be lucky. That hope was our only joy. And that's how we came to call our little parties Joy Luck. Soyeon's use of detached tone is her. As she transitions to the more gruesome events of her life, she describes the events as unbearable. Soyeon uses examples of her own desires to relate her need for celebration by asking, how much can you wish for a favorite coat that hangs in the closet and the house that burned down with your mother and father inside of it? Tan contrasts the wish for a comforting coat with Soyeon's dark reality of the loss of a family. The rhetorical question emphasizes the hopeless request for the warm coat and helps Soyeon display her need to rejoice in her time of misery. She even asked, what was worse? We asked amongst ourselves to sit and wait for our own deaths with proper somber faces, or to choose our own happiness. And immediately answers describing the joy she decided to find with the other damaged women of her village. Tan shares Soyeon's story of her Joy Luck Club to paint a picture of a depressive time of hope, of a woman with more pain and problems, choosing her happiness, finding her joy in the smallest corners of China. As shown through the snippet of the Joy Luck Club, survival is deepened through happiness. Tan's talent of shifting such dark times into some of the happiest days opens every reader to the opportunity to see the light in the dark days. Tan has reoccurring themes of hope and luck through her stories of the varying women and legacies they pass on to their daughters. As the chapters of the books are formed to resemble a game of mahjong, Tan emphasizes the idea that life is a game as we search for luck and strategize through life. Tan implements her ability to fluently speak English and Chinese to tie the two cultures together, blending the styles of storytelling. The stories go in the order of the women at each corner of the mahjong table, followed by their daughters. This shows not only contrast between the generations, but also a contrast between the cultures of the different countries they grew up in, while showing the similarities between their grief and the strive for good fortune. They play the game of life, and at some point in their lives, they all lose the game, but they don't write off possibilities of better days. So-yin's story illustrates the hardship her country was going through during the war. She tells her daughters, many people in the city were starving, eating rats, and later the garbage the poorest rats used to feed on. So-yin described a life with nothing to rejoice about, with every reason to give over to the depressive times. Though So-yin's tone of empathy, Tan characterizes So-yin as sympathetic. As So-yin lists the similar losses between her peers and herself, she says, within our families, we had lost generations. She has every reason to complain about the life she went through, but instead acknowledges her community's pain. So-yin's lack of self-pity shows her compassion for others and her ability to see others' pain through her own. Tan deepens the idea of So-yin's compassion when she says, it's not that we had no heart or eyes for pain, we were all afraid, we all had miseries. Through the repetition of we all, Tan uses So-yin's example to show that self-pity does not get us anywhere, but choosing to look past the despair can bring happiness. Wisława Szymborska gives a differing perspective of the stresses of war. In the end and the beginning, Wisława Szymborska reveals the drastic tolls of war. Szymborska illustration of the extensive rebuild and the hard work devastated communities will face after war. Through gruesome imagery and brutal diction, Szymborska warns those looking for war the consequences they will face in the end. Listen to her warnings. After every war, someone has to clean up. Things won't straighten themselves up after all. Someone has to push the rubble to the side of the road so the corpse-filled wagons can pass. Someone has to get marred in scum and ashes, sofa springs, splintered glass, and bloody rags. Someone has to drag in a garter to prop up the walls. Someone has to glaze a window, rehinge the door. Photogenic, it's not, and it takes years. All the cameras have left for another war. We'll need the bridges back and new railway stations. Sleeves will go ragged from rolling them up. Someone, broom in hand, still recalls the way it was. Someone else listens and nods with unsevered heads. But already there are those nearby, starting to mill about, who will find it dull. From out of the bushes, sometimes someone still unearths unrusted arguments and carries them to the garbage pile. Those who knew what was going on here must make way for those who know little and less than little, and finally as little as nothing. In the grass that is overgrown, cause and effect, someone must be stretched out, blade of grass in his mouth, gazing at the clouds. Both The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan and The End and the Beginning by Wisława Szymborska reveals the impact war has on communities and the long-term effects on many generations after. The communities must clean up the rubble and mess left behind from the war while short-staffed due to the displacement of half of their people. Both Tan and Szymborska's speakers revealed the aftermath of war through storytelling. Szymborska's speakers use gruesome imagery and brutal diction to drive the painful topic to the forefront of the reader's mind. Transitioning into stanza 2, Szymborska elucidates damage by mentioning the movement of rubble, but furthers her point with her description of the corpse-filled wagons. With her unmediated diction, Szymborska emphasizes the larger toll, death, that war has on communities. Similar to the structure of stanza 3, when Szymborska lists sofa springs, splintered glass, and bloody rags, moving from a more casual object like sofa springs to a horrific sight such as bloody rags and corpse, intensifies the price paid by war. By mentioning the sofa and the bloody rags, she suggests that those in war may lose everything: their homes, their lives, their loved ones. While Zaborska's speaker describes the hypothetical consequences and terrifying downfall of ordinary people, Tan's short stories asserts the goodness that can be found during times of downfall. As Soyen tells, she says, "We feasted, we laughed, we played games, lost and won. We told the best stories, and each week we can hope to be lucky." Zaborska ends the poem with a description of a peaceful death, with the imagery of grass that is overgrown and the gazing at the clouds. Zaborska ironically ends her poem with peace, as war would end in peace, but does so through death to remind the audience that the end of war is no better than the beginning of war. Zaborska's speaker opens the floor to the peace following the war, while Tan's story of Soyen shows how the peace doesn't give back the time that was taken or give back the love things lost. Tan shows that survival does not mean untouched. These accomplished women have displayed the consequences of war and the ability to choose our happiness when we lack enjoyment in life. As Soyen finishes telling her daughter of her days in Kylan, she gives her a happy ending. She ends by saying, "We can hope to be lucky. The hope was our only joy," teaching her daughter a lesson through her own life. As her daughter retells her mother's story, she shares her mother's message and leaves a little hope in her place.